So I appreciate you all joining today. John asked me to do this conference on a number of topics relative to security. Some of this will be redundant for some of you. I think you'll all find something to glean from it. Most of you know me. I've been involved with MTC for quite a few years, and it has been a lot of fun. Many great Korean lunches with John, and just have really been so pleased to be part of the organization. I do general marketing communications. I work in the STEM area quite a bit. I do a lot of web development, design, photography, and so forth. So it's a lot of fun, and that's my cat, Darcy the web cat, who's been banished from my office for this meeting. So let's get started. After the talk, John is going to send you this PowerPoint and a companion Word document for you to use as a worksheet if you decide to pursue what I'm recommending. So let's get started. John retitled this for me, Are Your Digital Assets Compromised? Let's see if you can find your id. I added that because it is so crazy and so scary out there that it's even hard to explain. Anybody who's a Lord of the Rings fan knows that scene when Frodo, the ranger, catches Frodo of the ring. He says, "Are you afraid?" And Frodo says, "Yes." He says, "Not nearly enough." So if you're not afraid of what can happen to your digital assets, then you need to be more afraid. This is the opening paragraph John had from the piece. I put it in the PowerPoint for comprehensive information, but it's just what you've already seen, especially in this age of distributed computing. You have people using all kinds of hardware, their own connectivity, all kinds of ways for you to be compromised. So this cartoon, one of my favorite cartoons ever, it was the first cartoon known to specifically evolve the internet from the New Yorker. It's on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. It is a great cartoon, and it applies to this in the sense that, I know in the early days of enterprise computing, you needed huge staffs and super sophisticated people, but now almost all those tools are now available right down to your home. You can go buy a high-end firewall. You can install the same software. And so doesn't matter whether you're a one-person company like me or you're a larger organization, people don't need to know that, and you shouldn't necessarily succumb to any of these problems more or less than any big corporation. You can solve this. Nobody needs to know. The second thing is what I call Lieutenant Dan rule. I have used this over and over again for everything I've taught. If you're a Forrest Gump fan, you know the scene. They get to Vietnam. Lieutenant Dan says, we have one rule here. We actually have two. One is dry socks, but the other one is don't do anything stupid like getting yourself killed. Why does that apply here? It applies to anything, any discipline. You control 99.9% of your universe as owners of your companies. The only thing that can affect you are earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and things that are outside of your control, but you should be prepared for those too. But it's really up to you. And let's take a look and see what happens. So the first section of this talk are 4 large areas that really you need to pay attention to. Passwords, digital fingerprinting, pwnage, and phishing. I'd say many of you have not seen pwnage, but we'll get to it. So the number of attacks, these 4 articles here are just from yesterday's news. Okay, I didn't collect these. If you go into Google News and you type in phishing attack or corporate compromise, there are literally hundreds of articles now. It is happening every single day. And not just to big corporations, but also to very small companies, and especially small municipalities, and where the hackers know that they don't have the resources to recover, and they'll have to pay. So this isn't something unique to an occasional thing. This is literally a daily event now. And if I showed you the logs of the websites, about 300 websites that I manage between myself and my sister company, we have literally thousands of hack attempts a day on our sites. I mean, you look at the logs, you just scratch your head. It's unbelievable how consistent it is. So password, obviously password strength. Now, I've literally had clients say, I don't want passwords on my server because they don't want to type it in. Or I don't want passwords on the workstation, they don't want to type it in. The fact is, we have passwords, we're sort of stuck with them. And it's really important to make sure that your passwords are well structured. Now, why? So take a look at this little chart. And I've used a tool here that you can easily get to. There's a whole bunch of these on the web. You can type in a password and test the strength. I typed in here, log me in, and it said it would take 8 seconds to break it, right? So if you look at these, just for example, December 27, 1969, take 3 hours for a computer to randomly discover that. Adding a pound sign, exclamation mark, 2,000 years. Creating a random 10-character password with just uppercase letters and numbers, 10,000 years, right? So it isn't really that hard, but it's so important because not only is it easy for modern computers to hack them, but the bottom is so important. We're going to see this when we get to have I been pwned. Hackers literally run through millions of known passwords and try them. And I have literally seen my logs where there's attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt with passwords that are known common passwords. And in the past, this might have taken a huge mainframe, but now any desktop computer did. I mean, my desktop workstation, I could handle 10 million records in SQL Server. I could run through databases in hours. So you have to look at your password strength across your organization. It's just super critical. Now, the second thing, of course, once you having done that, what can you do about it? Well, number one, you absolutely want to make sure you know every user on your system and that their passwords have been hardened or updated. And particularly key ones that drive your whole system, like server logins, router logins, Internet of Things devices, and so forth. And then you're going to test them for distribution, which we're going to get to when we get to the Pwned slide. You're going to update them, and if necessary, add third-party authentication. So I use the Google Authenticator, which you can see a little screen there, on all my critical accounts. My server account, our Rackspace account. You can't get into those with username and password without having the authenticator that's been registered to my phone uniquely. This makes it impossible for someone to break into my Roshan account or my Rackspace account or other critical accounts. But this is so important. I think you will be shocked if you do this exercise at the state of your username password situation. Now, the next one is fingerprinting. So what is fingerprinting? Well, you know fingerprinting, we all supposedly have a unique fingerprint, right? But when I learned about this a few years ago, I was blown away. So I'm just going to read this. Device fingerprinting or browser fingerprinting is the systematic collection of information about a remote device for identification purposes. So I'm going to show you what this looks like, and there's a website where you can go test this. So basically, why fingerprinting? Why is fingerprinting critical? Well, you've all heard of cookies. Cookies were invented very early on in the internet, and they're little physical files that are stored on your computer that allow you to like save your password or for a site to remember where you were, what your last product was, or 100 other things. There are security issues with them. You can control them. However, you don't have to be logged into a site for a cookie to be set. You can delete the cookies. You can block the cookies with software and so forth. But fingerprinting, no such luck. It's not local. It records your activity at the terminating server. Any device you use on the internet, any level of security or software, they're still recording it. And that enables someone to not only track your computer, which I'll show you in a minute, but also use behavioral analysis. And they live forever. So if you have a shared computer at home and the dad does accounting and the kids play games and the wife looks up recipes and then does some work for her employer, by looking at the patterns that are being used every time someone clicks on something, they can even know what the user is, even if the person isn't registered to the computer. And how does this work? So I did a test here of my computer, just did this morning. And if I go and fingerprint my computer, so we'll go do that right now here. So I just go back to here, my fingerprint, and there it is. This computer right here that I'm on right now is unique among the last 2,691,022 fingerprints. Why does that work? Because by looking at all the elements that my computer projects every time you click on something, and you can block some of this, but not all of it. Otherwise, you couldn't even browse the web. It collects all these little data points, none of which are confidential and none of which are secure. But when they combine that entire set of data with my IP address and other things, I am literally a unique computer. Someone is logging this computer every day when I go places in some way or another. So let's take a look at this. How does it do it? Well, there's more than 70 primary parameters and over 1,400 subparameters. And in fact, I went by it, but right here, this browser spy DK, which you can look at later, it gives you even more data points. Keep in mind, every time you click a mouse, these are all available to the receiving server. And what happens? You can read this article, it's in the PowerPoint. But in the end, you can't do much about it. But this is the issue. Your employees need to know that they can always be uniquely tracked by everyone in the world. That's all, right? It's like not any simpler than that. It is absolutely insane. So if you're just randomly browsing around and somebody's looking at sites they shouldn't be, or somebody's looking at competitor sites, that's all being logged. And somewhere in some big database out there, someone is looking at this data and saying, oh, this computer is interested in barbecues, or this computer is interested in new cars, or this computer is researching cancer, and it's outside of your control. And most people have no idea this is going on, but it is absolutely amazing. You should learn about it. You should educate your employees about it. So let's look at Pwned. So the word Pwned, actually, I looked this up. It came from a misspelling in an early game where he said, you've been owned, but he misspelled it. And now it became sort of a global word. It's actually in the dictionary. And generally it means that you own something or you master something. So as you know, if you watch the news at all, there have been numerous massive exploits of corporate databases. And unlike years ago, where if I decided I wanted to steal all your records, I'd have to break in at night with a big bunch of trucks and load up boxes and come back and spend months going through it. If I hack one of your databases, or I hack into any system and I download that, I can put that into play within minutes, literally minutes. There's absolutely no reason. So this site, haveibeenpwned.com, has collected every single exploited database that's available on the web, on the dark web, on pasted sites, and so forth. And you can see, I blew up the stats here. They currently have data on 479 enterprise sites. We don't even know how many little sites are hacked. Over 10 billion accounts. So what does that mean? Well, I tested my own email here, my primary email, and I'm on 13 Pwned sites. And then I went in and I did, just for fun, I did John's email, and he is on 9 breached sites. Now, this doesn't mean people have access to your account, but what it means is that sometime, somewhere, these 9 compromises have your email. And so therefore, I've regularly looked at this and then gone back and changed all my passwords, right, for those sites if I still have them, because it's really easy for someone to hack in if they have this information. And it's really important. And so what can you do? So again, this is a practical matter. The first thing is you should test every email in your corporation against the Have I Been Pawned site. You want to audit your emails. If you're like most companies, you have tons of emails that haven't been used for years, people who left, they aren't monitored, whatever. Get rid of those emails. And any ones that are in the pawnage database, change their passwords immediately. And if it's really critical to some of the emails, add third-party authentication. Because I say here, ignore pawnage at your own risk. The hackers will be happy. Fine. They'll love it if you don't do it. So these are resources that are just out there, and you can use them. They're all free and could have a significant impact on your company's security model. So let's get to phishing. So it's a word you've heard a lot. It's a cybercrime, and where people use normal social contact to gain access to corporations. Why try to figure out a password if someone will just give it to you? And basically, if you go through the news, and I went through this last night and this morning, nearly every major corporate compromise has used a social hacking and phishing as the gateway. Somehow they got through, they convinced somebody they were support, whatever. Here's just this morning's news. This is just a little piece of Google News, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Because not only can people just break in and just encrypt your whole network, which we'll get to in a minute, but what you're finding is hackers in large organizations are, like you see this headline here, are spending months literally learning about a company or a bank and little by little infiltrating it until they know exactly how to harm it or steal from it, and with complete invisibility. So it's really, really important that you deal with this corporately. So these are the phishing vectors that most happens. Obviously, email itself, even just an email without some kind of script blocking can execute. Email links. I mean, I don't know if LD you have elder parents, but when both my parents were using their computers, and my admin Holly Hall, her mom actually sent $2,000 to somebody one time because she clicked on a link and got this horrible message. The third one is phone calls. These people are really, really, really good at this. Hi, Mr. Kasner, I'm from Microsoft, and I noticed an error on your computer, this kind of thing. And again, your people need to be trained to look for that. And then scripts. Now, Visual Basic and JavaScript are all awesome, but they can be easily embedded in documents, in Acrobat files, Excel, PowerPoint, and even in JPEG headers, which blew me away a few years ago. One of my, not my site, but one of my friend's sites got hacked, and I was trying to figure out why it kept getting blocked. In the header meta tag of the JPEG was executable code under PHP. Unbelievable, right? And so you're like, wow, this is really scary. Remember, a good hacker, and they're getting so good at it, they only need one entry point to infiltrate, just one workstation, just one server. That's it. And then they're in, and you will not be able to find them. Just as an example, I got this literally 2 hours ago in my email. Prime order of iPhone from order shipment at care@amazon-usshipment.co. Is this a legitimate email? So first of all, I don't have any accounts at techbrick.com I can buy it from. Secondly is Mike S. in Houston, Texas. Thirdly is it's an unknown email address. And I didn't allow it to execute, as you can see, because I didn't really want to find out what it was trying to do. But I get these all the time. And a lot of people simply just don't see it. They're getting so good at emulating it, you will be absolutely shocked. But here's an example today. They probably wanted me to reply and say I didn't buy it, and then they would go through some rigmarole, tell me I have to get into my computer, whatever, but I didn't fall for it. So what can you do? So first of all, you probably all are already doing this. If you're with Microsoft Live 365, Google Business, Rackspace, many others, they already have built-in software firewalls. I hardly ever get spam email anymore. Once in a while, some Russian dating site will slip through, but Rackspace for me just kills it all. And you want to make sure it's configured correctly, especially in Live 365. There's a lot of settings. Get your IT people to look carefully at how you're dealing with their firewall. Secondly is use hardware firewalls. Again, these used to be tens of thousands of dollars. They are now hundreds of dollars for small networks. A physical hardware firewall with a subscription that just keeps traffic from even getting into your network. Next, effective machine device level software. So I use the Microsoft Defender, and then I use one other piece, Malwarebytes, and those two together pretty much block everything I need. There are many, many excellent tools, both enterprise and personal, and you should be using them, and you should be subscribing to them because they're sort of your last gasp of defense. And then lastly, provide training and with anyone with access to your systems, anyone, to help them identify how to deal with this. So you have a vendor, you have an IT consultant, you have an employee, you have an accounting firm. Anyone who can touch your system or exit or cross the barrier in any way needs to be trained to your standards, because literally just one click can destroy your company. These new encrypting software tools, I've read articles, they're encrypted within minutes, just minutes. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And if you get into a crypto thing, you're either we'll get to it in a second, either have to restore or you got to pay. My friend Ted, last year, I think, had to acquire over $30,000 in Bitcoin for clients to unencrypt various systems. So let's look at the sequel. So the first point, I can't make this any clearer, and I think you'll be shocked if you really look at it carefully. Every one of you, if you haven't done this recently, you need to set up and or confirm that you have rigorous and complete backups of all data and systems, both local and remote. A lot of people say, well, they have backups, but it's just one server. It's not the workstations. It's never been tested. It's not complete, and so forth. Secondly, and you may make some people mad at you, you want to demand that IT staff or consultants demonstrate a full recovery cycle. Ted, my friend Ted, again, who works with a lot of small and medium corporations, has had super many nightmares, people calling him saying, we had a backup, it's not, we don't know what to do with it. Just having a backup is different from being able to restore it. And that is so important. If you haven't done this, do it this week. Third point, make sure that someone in-house is aware of the process, not just an external organization. You need to know where the backups are. You need to know what the passwords are. You want written documentation. And if you don't have it, call Melissa on how to do this in case you go down. And the last point, so critical. If you had a facility loss from a disaster or someone cryptoed everything in a way that, or something else happened, could you get back up and running with your hardware? It seems so insignificant, but what do you need? What are the specifications for your workstation, your routers, your servers, and so forth? You should have an active list of those things and resources for them. Where do we get them? If a server completely blew up one night because it got hacked and you had to order a new server, where would you go, right? You should know that ahead of time. And then you just ask yourself the question, how long could you afford to be out of business? So let me give you two scary case studies. One is one of my clients down in White Marsh who got cryptoed a few years ago. His consultant was able to restore the entire network and server back within 6 hours. That was great. One of my other clients, I'm not an IT client, but their server got blown up by a lightning strike. The consultant, almost 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, has not yet been able to restore their data. They are really, really struggling. And the question is, how long could you be before to be out of business? 6 hours, 4 hours, 3 days, a week? I don't know. For most of us, not very long. And so I would just encourage you all. I know you're probably thinking, oh, we do this, but do you really? You really need to look at it carefully. So we're going to take a look at 3 other areas in general, and then we're going to take some questions. So I didn't do these slide by slide. I'm just going to talk through these points because they are I run into these all the time. So these are digital because they're digital assets to your corporation. First thing is logos. I can tell you with specificity, including John Kastner, I have not gotten valid finished logos from any company except the big corporations. So like US First Robotics, Black & Decker, Boys and Girls Club America, they have logo packets. But everyone else, and every year I do the NMTC brochure, I deal with all these companies, have sent me these really horrible low-res logos, different versions. They don't know where they came from. They don't have any sources. I'm saying if you haven't done this, even if you're a little company, you need to round up your logos and your corporate ID and make sure, hire somebody to redraw them all in Illustrator as vector-based, mathematically based logos and have them available in a well-defined spot in various sizes, both in vector and raster, like JPEG, PNG, and make sure there's guidelines on how to use them. Corporate ID is very important, and it doesn't matter whether you're a one-person company or whether you're a 1,000-person company on the internet. Nobody knows your dog, right? So this is so critical. I can say, again, with absolute certitude, not one company I've worked with in the last 6 years has been able to deliver to me pre-done, well-structured logos. It's amazing. So that's something to do. Next thing is colors. Oh my gosh. So colors are so critical. And yet very few people have a corporate color guide. And then when I get different logos, and some of you whose ads I've done for MTC, you have 6 different reds or 7 different blues, and you want to establish those and define them in red, green, blue, which is what you're generally going to use in Word documents and PowerPoint, CMYK for offset printing, Pantone matching system for solid colors. You're going to use PMS for T-shirts and so forth, and hexadecimal, which is the 6-digit string used by most web tools. And why is this important? Because some colors that look great in RGB look terrible in CMYK and PMS because the color gamut of your monitor is so wide compared to the actual ability to produce those colors, right? So when we produce logos and we do color bars for people, we check them in the different color models to make sure that it will look pretty much the same anywhere you use it on almost any medium. And I'll venture to say, again, I've not gotten this from any company I've worked with recently, till of course I did it for them. Usage guidelines. One of my little pet peeves, I hate getting emails that have a footer with a beautifully designed giant graphic for the ID instead of text. Because why? I can't copy and paste that, right? And I've seen different companies, people have different footers, I get different emails from people, I get different documents, different headers. It's not that hard, and I certainly could show you some samples, but in generally, what do you want your organization to look like? How much space do you want around a logo? Where does it go? Left, right, center, so forth. It's something you just need to do because it makes you look good. Phrases and punctuation. You know, if you have a motto or you have other text, you want to make sure it's right. There are so many examples of bad punctuation out there and accidental meanings. Most of the companies, I know most of you on this call, don't really have an official motto as such, but if you do and you have identifying text, please make sure people know how to use it. And then here's the really hard one. If you're, I use Backblaze for backup, so I know that I have over 2.5 million files backed up. It's crazy, right? Across the 2 workstations I have on my archive drives. We collect digital documents because it's hard to see them because they're not on a desk or in a file drawer or something. But I would encourage you, while you may have some time during this COVID thing, to go through all your core documents, everything you use as templates, and purge the ones that are no longer valid. So someone doesn't use an old version of a Word document or Excel spreadsheet or an Acrobat file or a logo or a video or whatever. And then review those things for consistency. I mean, you have a video did a few years ago, has all the wrong logos and the wrong addresses and so forth, or some really horrific things like a site that my friend was working on where the logo, the URL and the logos had been expired and now pointed to a Japanese site that sold bras. Okay, right? You don't want to put those out. So it's important. And then standards. You know, if you have people, especially working from home, and they're making a proposal or they're doing other types of things on their own, what do you want it to look like? 8.5 by 11 vertical, horizontal? What size? Are you going to bind it? If you're going to bind it, are you going to use coil binding? You're going to use comb binding? I hate comb binding. Are you going to, you know, and so forth. You have some standards for that so that it looks consistent. And then review all your publications and purge. This is hard. This is hard. I know it's hard. You know, you need to go through those closets and get rid of all the junk, all the stuff that's outdated. I don't care if you have 50,000 of them from when you used to have to print huge batches of stuff. It's tough. I'll send you a bottle of wine if you need it. It's hard to do. And then, of course, checking digital assets. Where is it stored? You know, now that we're working remotely, so people are now accessing networks or, you know, whatever. People need to know where those things are. There needs to be a folder that says, you know, corporate ID assets with read-only access to people so they can go get a logo or a template or so forth. I venture to say most of you don't have that, but it's really critical that you do. You just want your corporation to look good, and you want to make sure it's consistent. And of course, you don't have the same kind of control because you can't walk over to John's desk or Samantha's desk and look at what he or she is doing. They're working at home, right? So the only way you can ensure it is to make sure it's right. So let's go on to the next one. IT assets. We covered some of this, but I would encourage you to do a full sweep of all accounts that are in your system. Check the username and passwords, make your changes, add third-party authentication, but you may be surprised at how many different kinds of logins you have. The second thing is to decide while you're doing that whether you want to switch to functional versus personal emails for critical accounts. So for example, I always tell clients, create PayPal at or something like that. Or for instance, my sister company in South Carolina, the admin's address is support@nehemiahcommunications.com. Why? Because if Angela leaves, support is still a valid email, not Angela at. Angela doesn't even have an email now. And so it really is important to pick accounts that are functional and make sure they're not assigned to an individual. It makes it much easier to manage going forward. The third one, this one will probably shock you if you do it, is to go and actually go around and you make a list of every single online account that your organization may use. Twitter, Facebook, various logins, resources, financial organizations, software subscriptions. I have hundreds of these literally. And I keep them all carefully tracked in a spreadsheet and a Word document, because this is where you can be compromised at some point. And then you want to log into every account and make sure it's updated, update the address, make sure there's no antiquated information, make sure it doesn't have an email from somebody who's no longer there and a domain you no longer control and so forth, and delete the ones you don't want. Next is access to critical accounts. Who has access to your corporate email, your online backups? your domain registrars, your network logins. Who are they? Where are they? Where are they? Do you know? Do you know the logins for these? So this particular client I was telling you about, whose information is not available, the IT guy managed their online backups, and they fired him, and he's sort of holding it hostage, and they can't get to it because they didn't have a login to it, right? So this is so important. Again, I'll bet you if you do this exercise, you're going to be really shocked at what you find. And then, of course, social media, which is sort of part of the one above, but more specific. Google has hundreds of input vectors. You want to find out where yours are. Make sure you know these accounts are in case something happens. If someone gets into your Facebook account, starts defacing it, you don't want to scramble around trying to find out who's the admin. Oh, it was Jane. Oh, she left a year ago, right? No, don't want that. And then software patches. So this is the primary vector for direct hacks globally, people who don't patch their software. So again, much like the backup thing, you need to get on your IT staff or your consultants and say, I want confirmation that every major piece of software you have is up to the current security patch. Because once there's a known vector, it will be attacked relentlessly. And again, you can go in the news, just the last few weeks, there are a bunch of these. A Microsoft compromise was released, and it was immediately pursued globally. Oh, terrible, terrible stuff. All right, lastly is training. And again, I know a lot of you, I know you work at this, but you really do want to train people on username, password management, and general security on the computers. Phishing, they need to understand all the issues about phishing. Do a seminar, hire somebody to do a seminar. Make sure they know how to look for the obvious emails. And then your security protocols. You want to make sure people understand how to use your VPN and how to log in securely on workstations, even if they're on a personal computer, and any other issue related to the security of your organization. I know some of you work in high security situations for the government, and your liability is really high. So this is so important. And then company assets. You know, if somebody has a question about or has an issue, who do they go to? Who do they ask? Who has an answer? If someone thinks they compromised their computer, who do they call immediately? Do you have that number on their phones? Is it pasted on their desk? Because sometimes you literally only have minutes to resolve it. And you don't want any of that to happen to you. So that is your big, scary tech overview. I'm going to encourage you, if you have a few minutes, to go to my website. If you want to take a break and watch something a little lighter, you'll watch my cool little 12-minute PowerPoint on how to improve your online meetings, and go get my lifetime of ideas, organize your digital Word document that gives you all kinds of more ideas. Other than that, I'd like to just stop and take any questions or comments. I'll turn it back to you, John. And thank you all for your attention. Hope this was helpful. I didn't mean to scare you at the end of the day. Like I said, if you're really stressed out, I'll send you a bottle of wine.
Well, Marco, thank you very much. I think it was more than informative. In fact, I would say scary. From what you described, we talked yesterday about the things that I did not know about that are going on every day. And we're going to open it up with questions.